Hey gang, Sam here. On this episode of GarageCast, we talked to Bob Pappajohn, who has a marine dealership in Vancouver, Canada. And yes, we talked all things tariff. Enjoy this episode of GarageCast.
This is a show for anybody that has something that they want to say. It's going to be full of people with a lot of energy, CEOs, OEMs, vendors.
Best practice ideas in this industry and of neighboring industries.
We're talking to people that are on the cutting edge of processes, management.
Serial entrepreneurs, authors. We really have a feast of all different types of senior level people.
A cornucopia, as it were.
A plethora, maybe. Grab a pen, grab a cup of coffee, and have a seat. Start writing. This is GarageCast.
GarageCast. Welcome to GarageCast. Nate Sannel. I got a lot of text and email about that episode. Wow.
Like, walking the line with that Nate guy, quote unquote. Yeah, walking the line.
Yeah, Nate was he was a good interview, and a lot of people were like, "Man, that's crazy." But I think Nate did a really good job of explaining it very well, and he had his why for what he did. Yeah. And obviously, one of the things I said in that episode was we have a ton of dealers that hang banners of all the OEMs that make tons of money because of them. And so, I mean, it's just a different perspective on what you're good at. And I think he brought a great perspective.
I think so too. For those who missed the episode last week, you're talking about a guy who a used bike aficionado, massive used bike dealer who also carried new and finally had it with the manufacturers and cut them loose and went solely back to pre-owned. So interesting podcast from Nate Sannel. We had a lot of fun filming that, but for you guys, you might want to go back and check out last week's podcast.
This week, we have another unique individual for many different reasons. The first time I laid eyes on this guy, I thought to myself, is this guy a marine dealer or is he James Bond? Like he's undercover right now. So sharp dressed, looks like he should have a scotch in his hand at all times, like refined. But
Aston Martin running around fighting crime. I'm
exactly.
with you.
Yeah. So Bob Pappajohn, Bob, we met you years ago when we started the Nautique groups with Nautique sponsorship on those, and it's just really great for you to be on our podcast. So welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm honored to be on with you guys.
Thank you, buddy. We're excited to have you.
Yeah, me too, man. So listen, at the end of the day, you got a great story right now that I think is going to tell a lot of our dealers kind of where we are right now. But I want you to start in the beginning. And for the people that don't know you, give the listeners a look into your history, where you're from, how you got into business, and how you ended up here.
Yeah, it's a classic second generation story with a bit of a twist. My dad and his partner back in 1957 discovered something called fiberglass boats, which were at the time, they were new, exciting, and disruptive. They totally disrupted the wood boat building group. So they had a great run. I kind of grew up in that, water skiing like every day till my arms fell off, having a lot of fun with mostly with lake boats. They sent me off to be a lawyer. Don't know why, but so I went to school and I spent some time in university in England. I kind of went down to the south of France a fair bit for lots of fun reasons and saw a lot of big yachts down there. So I took a year off, went back to Vancouver, and was like, God, we could probably do something here. So I started something called M&P Yacht Center, focusing on boats that stayed in the water from like 30 to 80 feet. We did well. My dad and his partner needed an exit strategy, so I bought them out in 2007 and promptly opened another store. Now, if you remember 2007, I think that had something to do with the Great Recession. So my timing was impeccable, or not. I kind of know a thing or two about recessions, and that word, oddly enough, seems to be coming up a fair bit right now.
Yeah. So really quick on your history, you went back to tell the listeners where you're from and where you do business and how that unique thing works.
So we're based in Vancouver, Canada, on the West Coast. Our boating is basically from here to Alaska, which is fantastic, wonderful boating. We've got, like I said, we got two locations. We got a yacht center right in downtown Vancouver. Then we've got a trailer boat store on Vancouver Island, and then one inland in Vancouver.
Bob, for perspective, you said 30 to 80 footers. And how many of those do you have on the ground right now or in the water?
At the Yacht Center right now, for many good reasons, our inventory is lower. So we're down to new boats. We're about in that segment. We're down to 10. Typically, we will inventory somewhere between 30 to 40. But our pre-owned, a little bit like your previous podcast, we have shifted gears and ramped up a lot of pre-owned, and we've tripled our brokerage business in the last few years, primarily driven by Canadian government. Governments have wonderful ideas. I say that very sarcastically. They decided that yachts needed a 10% luxury tax on them. So our bigger segment has been more challenging. We've had to work extremely hard to keep that going. But we've also shifted gears on that segment and put a lot more emphasis on product that didn't have a luxury tax attached to it.
Gotcha. Beautiful part of the country for anyone who's not been out there. I would agree with you. It's absolutely stunning, particularly if you're playing on the water in any capacity. That is just absolutely amazing. So look, you brought up recession, you brought up luxury tax. Obviously we're in the world of tariffs right now. What's your first reaction to what's happening? You got a luxury tax, you got a tariff on top of the luxury tax. You've been through this game before. Where's your head go with all this?
Well, right now, Canada specific, we've got a number of headwinds, and the seas are rough. It's nasty out there. We have a 10% luxury tax. Our Canadian dollar is depreciated by over 10%, and we've got a less robust economy. Now, the tariffs are something that are likely to affect everyone almost globally, and for us, we're kind of at the front of it. We went through it in Trump's first term. There was a tariff on steel and aluminum, so we know how that played out and how it affected us and how it affected the consumer and pricing, et cetera. So this one is a lot stronger and more broad-based. So what's happened, if you weren't paying attention, and sadly I pay way too much attention to this thing because it affects us literally hour by hour. But the tariffs initially for Canada and Mexico were on and very broad-based and big, 25%. That's a strong amount. Then they were paused, and then they were back on again, and then they were paused again, and then they were doubled, and then they were cut in half, and then they were moved around. So it's essentially like a giant sword over your head that might come down, will come down. You just don't know when and how hard. Is it going to take off your hand, your foot, take off your leg, or is it going to take off your head?
Wow. I don't want to go to that movie to start with.
Go ahead.
You mentioned in Trump's first term, you dealt with that. So what did you learn from that you could apply right now? Because you're in this world of I don't know right now. Yeah.
So back at that time, we were 100% American-made boats. Every brand we had, every boat we sold was from the U.S. And when that tax came through, or the tariffs came through, it stopped everything. We sold one boat under the tariff. That was it. So the consumer, there's a lot of talk about who's going to absorb it, when the tariff goes in, who actually pays for it. But at the end of the day, what we've always seen and what how it plays out, as dealers, we kind of know what our margins are. There's no 25% to absorb in and still make money. Right. So you pass it along. You tighten up as best you can. But the vast majority of it goes along. OEMs can help a little bit, but they've only got so much they can do as well, too. So at the end of the day, the price to the consumer goes up. The consumer sees that number and says, wow, great, I'm happy to pay more. I don't know, I haven't met that guy yet, but I'm still looking for him. I have hope he's out there. Or they say, not going to do it at all. I'll wait. Maybe this will pass. I don't want to be the one that pays a tariff, especially when they're on and off and so forth. And a lot of people saying that it's transient. Or they go do something else. What can I buy that isn't affected by that? And that tended to be the majority. So we took that learning and we've moved our product segment while we still have all the American brands. And in fact, we've added more. We right now on dollar volume, we're over 60% is European product now.
Wow. That was a turn, huh?
That was, yeah. And how quickly did that happen?
It took some time, but, it was, we just you could see right away that we were in a very vulnerable position. And adding brands adds complexity to your organization, everything from accounting to admin to, sales teams knowledge to understanding, how warranty works, et cetera. It's not a great thing. If you can get all your revenue from one brand, that would be awesome. But it was necessary in order to, make sure that we had mitigated our risk.
Got it. So tell our listeners about the timing of the tariff threat in relation to your Vancouver boat show. and for the power sports side of life that's listening to this is you guys have to understand a massive part of a marine dealer's nut is the boat show. And those typically happen in what is not considered prime boating season, right? Those are happening in winter, happening in fall. They're happening in the early part of spring. And so you had your boat show, and when was that and what happened?
So the day that Trump set on that he was going to sign the tariffs into effect with the executive order was February 2nd, which is the Saturday of our boat show. And Saturdays on boat shows, all boat dealers know that's the best day. That's normally your biggest day. Leading up to that, all the experts on either side of the border and elsewhere were going, you know what, this isn't going to happen. This is really a negotiating position. This will be negotiated out. The previous tariffs were negotiated out, but it just took some time. And it was like, well, we've all learned from that. Let's figure out what the Trump administration wants. What do they need from Canada? What do they need from Mexico? This will likely all go away. But it really puts some pressure on, which obviously it did. So, listening to the experts, it was like, this won't happen. So that when it did was right in the middle of the busiest time of our boat show. And I could look around our display and see everyone on their phone and nudging each other going, what in the world? So yeah, we, that kind of froze everything up at our show.
Just with it, when I ask you this, was it with there was no representation at the show, as in the show traffic kind of went down, or people just were non-committal at that point, or yes?
No, the traffic, everyone was there, right? Because it was right in the basically middle of the afternoon. But it was more like people coming up to me going, oh, I feel bad for you. Or you're not going to sell any more boats, really reassuring comments.
That I'm assuming everyone got themselves in a tailspin, including all of your team at that point.
Yeah. On the one hand, we're expecting it wasn't going to happen, but, you always got to be prepared for the worst. There's this saying that I'm using now hourly: prepare for the worst and aim for the best. So, I kind of had a game plan of if it was going to go through, how I would do that. So I warned the team ahead of time, hey, if this goes through, there's going to be a big negative reaction. Stay calm. It's not for years, people have predicted the sky's falling. Hasn't fallen yet. Could tomorrow, but still hasn't. We'll get through this. So for me being there to make sure everyone's okay, they've all got deals in the works. They got things with subjects on them, and basically to get phones and texts saying, hey, hold off, stop, I'm not going to do anything. Pretty disheartening on the team. It'll discourage you pretty quickly. And when you are discouraged, you're not going to be successful. So, my role becomes, cheerleader and reassurer in general, make sure that, hey, we can get through this. We can make this happen. There's always a route through. There's always a way to success.
And how did you, look, that's been several weeks now. How did you regroup? I mean, you're sitting here with, I expected you to tell me with the 30 to 80 foot boats that you still had 30, 35 of those, but you have 10 of those. So you're clearly moving some products somehow. How did you regroup between the boat show and now?
So, between the boat show and now, yeah, it's not been easy. So sales are below our projections. So a couple of things. One of the things we're doing was we sat down and, your budgeting process, which you normally do, earlier on, well ahead of the year, bring it back out, come up with a new plan, figure out what you need to cut, what is it going to look like? What's the reality now? What can we do to adjust to ensure success and ensure survival? Let's readdress all of that with the team, make sure we have a plan in place that's solid. And I've been a growth guy forever. And it's all about growth. Let's go. Let's make this happen. So about a year and a half ago, we started a process of pulling out over $1 million worth of expenses, resizing the company, largely due to the luxury tax and the exchange rate, and just headwinds were coming. You could feel it. We didn't think it'd be this bad. So we went through a very difficult year last year in terms of resizing. We took a lot of what we thought were one-time costs and really took it on the chin, saying, all right, one big one and done. 2025 is going to be good. We're ready for it. Well, we've had to do it again. So now we're getting good at it. But let me warn you, it's not enjoyable.
Yeah, I can imagine.
So we've been focusing on that. And then at the same time going, all right, where is all the places that we are missing revenue, where we're not bringing it in or we're letting it fall between the cracks, letting it run through? What are all those items that Sam says, listen, look at this. Here's where you're losing money. Here's where you've got upside. Where at times we're like, okay, you're right, but we got bigger fish to fry over here. Now every fish is a fish to fry. So yeah, that's the broad strokes of it. Coming in with, a can-do attitude, we can make this work. And the other thought, when you're faced with this strong a series of headwinds, you've got to go into things and think outside of the box, and everything's on the table.
Yeah.
Everything's on the table. I went to the team. All right, we can save a lot of money if we fire me. Fortunately, they all voted to keep.
That's he who has the gold makes the rules at the end of the day. Wow. So I'm wondering, look, I'm not trying to go political with this podcast. I think you have a very unique perspective being in Vancouver, being in the luxury market, and also having some of those smaller brands out there, and having gone through this now twice. When those 25% tariffs were announced, the news cycle covered it as a response to transnational threats of fentanyl and immigration, as opposed to just a tax imbalance, which is what we've been hearing as well, that between different countries, we're trying to balance, the tax the imbalance between the two countries with import and export. So how do you see it?
Well, so there's a couple of sides to look at it, but first on the Canadian side, for Canada, it's really, really puzzling. Based on the U.S. numbers, not our numbers, based on the U.S. numbers, yes, there was an awful lot, a horrific amount of illegal immigration coming across the southern border. Got it. Northern border, less than 0.5% of what was coming into the States came from Canada. So we're like, how does this work? Now, for an executive order on trade, if I understand U.S. law well enough, and is that you do have to have a reason. You can't just unilaterally do it. And one of it needs to be a national emergency. So yes, horrific immigration, illegal immigration, and fentanyl. National emergency. Okay, now we've got a legal reason for putting this in. So that checks a box. Now, is it actually happening? Does it need to, or can you just say it is? But by U.S. numbers, yeah, less than half of 1% of people coming into the States illegally was coming from Canada. Canada said, hey, if this is the problem, we'll solve it. We bought some Black Hawk helicopters, put a whole bunch of people on the border,
Yep.
and within a very short period took that small amount to almost nothing. In fact, by both stats, there's more people coming up from from the U.S. side into Canada than going down. Now, a lot of those have come up from Mexico illegally, and now they're coming in. So we want to stop all of that. But anyhow, it was a very, very small amount, and that has been generally stopped. And Lutnick even said, hey, they've done a good job. When it comes to fentanyl, yes, there are, once again, a lot of seizures on the southern border. On the northern border, the number, once again, less than 0.5%. And where that number came from was seizures in northern states, not actually things found at the border. So the question is, did that stuff come from Canada or was it actually up from Mexico? When we on our side of the border, we're seizing more stuff coming up from the U.S., which is actually coming up from Mexico, not the U.S.'s fault, then going the other way. So we don't see a justification for it. And once again, the justification has now shifted. Now it's about trade. Now it's about banking. There's no U.S. banks in Canada. I can look out my window and actually see a U.S. bank in Canada. They're here. We bank with Wells Fargo. It's a U.S. bank. So while a stated reason, it's not actually a fact. Balance of trade. Okay, great point. Balance of trade. Canada does sell more to the U.S. Than vice versa. But what is it that we sell? In terms of goods, Canada is the number one consumer of U.S. goods in the world. Number one. We actually consume more goods than we export. And we consume way more services. And 80% of our vacations are to the U.S. because your weather's way better than ours.
Yeah.
But what makes the difference in the numbers is we export more energy. We export electricity and we export oil. So wait a minute, oil. U.S. is one of the biggest exporters of oil in the world. In fact, they are the biggest. So why are you guys buying from us? Main reason why, two reasons. Ours is cheaper. You can buy from us cheaper and export for more. Plus, we have this heavy type of oil that is a specific purpose. So stuff you can't really get elsewhere. So you take that out, Canada actually takes more in. So is that really the reason? We don't know.
What's your gut? What's the play,
no one's been able
Bob?
to actually figure out what the end game is, except there's two things. What Canada does not do right, and shame on Canada, our defense budget is low. And our government has committed to bringing it up to this the minimum of 2% and beyond, but they put way too long a timeline and it's not right. And I know from the people I know here, yeah, that needs to be changed and should be changed and done rapidly. Beyond that, there's another thing, and this may be a negotiating tactic or it may not. Trump keeps calling Canada the 51st state and calling our prime minister a governor and has said he's going to use economic means to annex Canada and Canada doesn't have a right to exist as a country, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Well, is that the end game? Canadians don't know. If you really want a country to join you, would you insult the crap out of them? Probably not.
Yeah, that rhetoric is, to me, it gets a little. It's like the height of folly to those points. You know, the Greenland stuff, the whatnot. So trying to sift through tariffs as to why. And Sam and I have had conversations. The team has had conversations. We have a lot of Canadian clients, a lot of them.
Yep.
And they've reached out. Some of them heartfelt, some of them joking, some of them like, you guys are absolute idiots. I get messages and texts or seeing stuff on Facebook from our Canadian friends and clients. It sucks to see, man. It sucks to see that it sucks to see calling Canada the 51st state. So I'm not sure exactly what's up with the tariffs, but I guess for me, what I wanted people to hear on this podcast is I wanted to hear a real voice that does the real things that you guys do here in the US that is suffering because of these tariffs, because they don't make sense for the US either. And those are our dealers is what I'm talking about. It doesn't make sense for them either. So
Yeah, so in Canada, we don't see where the end game is, apart from, hey, take Trump as his word. He's gonna, pummel Canada down into submission. We're the weak guy in the schoolyard, and you go beat up on that guy and say, hey, China, look what we can do to you. So it's not a great position to be in. Canadians love Americans. We love America. And everyone's just in disbelief about how this is going. And if the end game is to say, hey, let's join together, my God, this is the absolute wrong way to go about it. So as it affects business is right now, when you have immense and acute uncertainty, things freeze. So consumer spending is way down. Business investment, if you don't know what the lay of the land is going to look like, how can you make your plans? Yes, it's frozen everything up until people can see what happens. Once there's some sort of consistency, you can now adjust and go forward. But right now, it is so volatile and none of it makes sense.
I'm going to guess it's so volatile that your leads have gone withered away on the vine as well, because nobody's buying because they don't understand what's happening. Absolutely.
Yeah. The inbound is non-existent. So, for us, we can't just sit there and say, wait for a lead to come in. You can never do that. But our outreach has to be more aggressive than ever. So for us, it's reaching out, talking to people, listening to them, understanding their fears, commiserating, but then going back to, hey, what do you want to do? You still want to enjoy life? Do you want to let this ruin your life, or do you want to go forward and have some fun? And it's really tough because our sales team are having to endure exponentially more no's, exponentially more, what the hell are you thinking? Buy a boat? Are you nuts? Mm-hmm. And continue to stick in there for a lot longer term. And that's, once again, Sam wasn't happy, but I missed my last 20 group meeting.
Because that's a story in and of itself. So your winter round, your 20 club, you did not attend. And I think that deserves a little bit of the story.
Yeah, well, first of all, it's one of my favorite meetings throughout the year. If you don't belong to a Garage 20 group, you should.
There, all right. Well played.
Unfortunately, I had to make the very difficult decision to not go. The first day of our 20 group meeting was March 4, which is the second deadline for the 25% tariff on Canada to go into place. So once again, me being here with the team, reassuring the team, making sure everyone is calm, knows what we need to do, knows why we need to do it. And if they're feeling overwhelmed, I've talked to more customers directly in the last 60 days, I think, than ever. And it helps. So once again, keeping your team focused in a time of crisis, which it really is for us, is something that's all hands on deck. And just being there, being physically there to sit down in a group makes such a big difference.
Yeah. Well, Tony, I think part of the crisis was that he forgot to send his $200 in for his missed commitments.
Oh,
that's.
Oh no, I didn't forget.
Catastrophic.
It's 200 US. I can't afford it. That's what it is. I didn't forget. It was a cost cut.
That's a good point. Hey, talk to us about, that group sponsored by C. Ray. I think they've done a very good job at handling their side of what's going on with these tariffs. Maybe you've heard some of that. What are your thoughts on OEMs, and what are they doing to help?
Well, number one, they don't want to lose market share. And, we know that the market isn't as robust globally as anyone would like. So everything counts. They have been great at understanding a lot of things. First of all, we are, able to retail less. We're going to have to unfortunately stock less, which we don't want to do. We like having inventory. You don't have it, you can't sell it. It's very difficult. But yeah, we've got to make some tough decisions to make sense around that financially. And in terms of getting deals done and over the line, Brunswick in particular has done a great job with helping to move around production to get us boats ahead of time. consumers who had deals, boats on order, move them to the front of the line, get them here, so they do avoid the tariff. And then once it actually does happen, working out some way where between us compressing our margins even more and some help on their side, we can at least offset some of it. But tariffs don't get paid by the suppliers. They get paid by the consumers at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And the tough thing right now, the one that is in place right now is the global tariff for America on aluminum and steel. Canada sells a ton of aluminum. Main reason why is that aluminum is very, very electricity is actually the main ingredient. It takes a lot of electricity to do that. And in our northern areas, we've got lots of hydroelectric power that's very inexpensive, and especially when the aluminum facilities are right up there. So we can build it cheaper. We sell it to the States at a low price. It becomes part of things like outboard motors, and globally, Brunswick can do well with that. Now, if that price goes up 25%, price of outboards are going to go up. And price of everything with aluminum in it goes up to the consumer at the end of the day.
Tony, you remember how many podcasts we were talking about, just because of supply chain issues, the manufacturers were charging more, and then dealers were putting it wasn't a waiver, but it was a one pager about why we have to pass some of those along to customers out there, but it wasn't 25% more. Bob, when I mentioned Sea Ray, I think they, along with several other proactive manufacturers, did a good job of getting their product that was already built and maybe being stored in different countries that would be affected by this out of those countries and to the dealers ahead of time. So to your point, I think they did a good job getting you the product you need. The problem is just now, how do you handle that tariff moving forward?
Correct. Yeah.
Hey, Bob. So in light of what's happening, do you intend to drop any manufacturers because you have to, or because you want to? And I mean, you don't have to name who it is, but is that going through your head? And do you intend to maybe look for more European OEMs to ensure that you're a little bit insulated from this in the future?
So dropping, no. It's once again, the best thing to do with your OEMs is communicate and let them know what's going on and be honest and open with how it affects you. And for us, it's more of a pause. Once again, we don't know if this is permanent, semi-permanent, or going to be over, or delayed again. So at this point in time, we're on a pause. But that said, yes, we have to go out and look for alternative sources. Don't want to, because it adds complexity. But it's not necessarily, it's not direct replacements. It's just trying to find something to replace the volume, if you will.
Yeah. What are we not talking about that we should be talking about? What haven't we hit relative to this tariff, other than we just don't know and we're going to play the hand we're dealt?
I think the biggest thing is the realization stateside that tariffs are essentially a tax when something comes across the border, and it's on everything, and it increases the prices. When we've had the tariffs here, the prices went up, and so understanding that maybe if aluminum's up 25%, that's not going to raise the price of an outboard 25%, but it's going to raise it a significant amount. Yeah. So now we've all been unhappy with the price increases that we've had, over the last 5 years. But now to have more on top of that, and in a environment that right now is not really feeling very robust, this is something that's going to be very difficult on the market altogether. And Canada loves one thing. We love a strong beer. USA. Beer.
Hockey.
Canadian beer.
Wait a minute. You're throwing me fastballs. Beer.
Okay. Let me rephrase that. In business, if there's a strong U.S. economy, we're happy. We want you guys to win because we'll do okay. So the weakening of the U.S. economy is bad. No one wants to see that.
Right.
Yeah, for sure. Okay.
Well, and then I guess what can our company, what can the manufacturers, what can a 20 club member, what helps? Like what makes this? I know it's probably just the easing of the uncertainty and the madness, but is there anything else that can be done?
Well, I think, as we've learned going through COVID, going through so many things that we hadn't been through before, you can't beat stuff alone. You need resources. You need to count on your friends, your partners, people that have been through things as well. So, for us, it's making sure we reach out and stay very close with our OEMs, do the very best we can, let them know our situation, and always look for the win-win. For Garage Composites, once again, get the stuff done that we know we're supposed to do, and do it in fast time. High velocity change. It's something that now we're having to get very, very good at. And don't be afraid to pick up the phone and say, "Hey, I got a problem. Help me out." So we need support. We're having daily department meetings now on our profit and loss. Right now, it's like line by line every day. And we're getting very, very creative. But it's all about support and helping each other out. And if there's any way in reciprocally we can help out, the OEMs or anyone else with what we're going through and what we're learning, then we'll get through it more successfully together.
Yeah. Ed Lemko always used to say that best practices are learned in the hardest of times. And which is what you're going through right now, which totally sucks right now. Mm-hmm. I know, but it's going to set you up for having those systems in place should something like this ever come down the road again. I can only hope that you get through it. Bob, you're one of the most, I've told you this before, when we did that training with your staff, you're one of the most inspiring, just genuinely very good people that I know, not to mention an excellent businessman. So if anybody can pull through this with your team intact, I think it's you. I know that's not much consolation with where you guys are sitting right now, but we really do. I believe you're going to be fine through all this, and we really appreciate you coming on.
Sam, hey, appreciate the kind words. We know one thing, doesn't matter how good we've been, we need to be better. We need to rise to the occasion. We need to do it as a team. And it's just it is a great opportunity. Unfortunately, it's a forced opportunity to excel. And yeah, coming out the other side, we'll be in much better condition.
It's great.
I had a thought a couple of weeks back when I was reading a headline about annexing Canada, Bob, and it had to do with Quebec. I thought to myself,
where are you going with this? And wait a minute, you were reading something that in itself is
to myself that Trump wants to annex Canada, but he doesn't even know what's going on between Quebec and the rest of the country, right? Like, can you imagine the Quebecs, the Quebecois that are up in arms? Like, how dare you, right? So,
yeah, it would be the classic.
People in Canada don't like people from Quebec, and I'm saying that for my Quebec friends who I love to death. But yeah, Canadians don't like Quebec.
Yeah,
so.
yeah. No, he clearly hasn't thought that through very well, and it would be one of these things where I got this oh my God, how do I get my money back? That's right. Take it. Yeah.
Keep the receipt.
We'll take everything except Quebec.
Yeah.
So, that cracks me up. Hey, Bob, I echo Sam's sentiments, man. I look up to you. I think you're awesome, and I know you'll get through this. And any way we can help you, we will.
Thanks, guys. I really appreciate it. You guys are awesome. So much we've learned from Garage Composites, more than you know. So one of the things that did help our boat show is Sam gave our team a fire up review basically the day before the show. And normally we do it quite a ways before. But this worked because everyone went in going, Sam said this, Sam said that. It was fresh in their mind. There wasn't other stuff going on. And we had an awful lot of fun with it. So thank you for that. Really, it made a difference.
Oh, I'm glad. Unfortunately, right behind Sam said was Trump said, and I think I got trumped by that.
Hey, thanks for taking time out, buddy.
Okay. Appreciate it, guys.
Thanks for listening, everybody. For Bob Pappajohn and Sam Dancer, I'm Tony Gonzalez. This has been GarageCast. Have a fantastic Tuesday.
Thanks, everyone.